They say children should obey. They say citizens should trust. They say believers should submit. But you've never been able to. From the beginning, you carried a question in your chest, a burning voice that asked, why? When everyone else bowed their heads and said yes. Why should I obey? Why should I trust? Why should I kneel? And that question has mocked you ever since. It made teachers dislike you. It made bosses fear you. It made family members shake their heads at you and roll their eyes every time you spoke. Because the world doesn't reward questions, the world rewards obedience. And yet, you cannot stop. This is the Socratic burden, the mark of the exile, the fire that makes you different. It's what made Socrates hated in Athens, and it's what has made you hated in your life. If you felt the sting of being punished for asking the questions no one else dares, then you already bear the Socratic burden. You're a Catharsian. Step into the fire. Join the Catharsians on Patreon. Find the link in the description box. Authority doesn't fear violence. It knows how to handle violence. Authority doesn't fear chaos. It knows how to restore order. What authority fears most is the question, because the question unmasks the illusion. The question stripes away the costume. The question reveals that the emperor has no clothes. When Socrates asked politicians what justice was, he revealed they didn't know. When he asked poets what beauty was, he revealed that they couldn't explain it. When he asked generals what courage was, he revealed their cowardice. Every question made the powerful tremble, and that's why authority hates you, because you, too, refuse to swallow the story. You refuse to kneel before the ritual. You refuse to let empty words control your life. Every time you ask why, you expose the hollow core of the system, and the system cannot forgive you for that. The Pythagorean path is the place where your questions become discipline, not chaos. If you're ready to sharpen your fire, begin here. Join the Pythagorean path on Patreon. Find the link in the description box. Every truth bearer carries the same burden. They're exiled, mocked, punished, not for crimes, but just for questions. Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth, but what was his crime really? Teaching them to think, showing them that authority could be wrong. And that's your crime too, because every time you asked questions, you gave others permission to think. Every time you refused to kneel, you reminded others that they were kneeling. Every time you refused to obey, you made authority tremble. That's why you've been excluded. That's why you've been silenced. That's why you've been punished. Not because you're broken, but because you are the proof that obedience is not inevitable. Inside Diogenes' barrel, exile becomes proof of power. If you've been punished for your fire, this is your sanctuary. Enter Diogenes' barrel now on Patreon. Find the link in the description box. You've always felt out of place. Conversations bore you. Obedience disgusts you. The blind faith of others feels suffocating. And so they've called you arrogant. They've called you difficult. They've called you dangerous. But what they really mean is you're a question they cannot answer. You embody the thing they fear most, the refusal to accept mediocrity. You represent the possibility that everything they believe might be a lie. And so instead of facing the question, they attack the questioner. That's why you've been mocked. That's why you've been excluded. That's why you felt like an alien in your own world. Not because you don't belong anywhere, but because you belong to the fire. The Socratic burden is heavy. It isolates you, it exhausts you, it makes life harder than it is for others. But it is also proof that you were chosen, because questioning authority is not just rebellion, it's initiation. It's the mark of those who can't be tamed. It's the brand of those who were never meant to kneel. The burden is not punishment, it is the key to your destiny. The rage you carry is not madness, it's clarity. The exile you've endured is not weakness, it's proof. The questions you cannot silence are not flaws, they are weapons. And the world will hate you for it, just as it hated Socrates. But if you endure the burden, if you refuse the hemlock, if you carry the fire, you will rise. The Aurelius Council is for those ready to rise from questioner to leader, from outsider to ruler. If you feel your burden is the crown you were born to wear, step into the Aurelius Council. Join the Catharsians on Patreon now from the link in the description box. The Athenians didn't despise Socrates because he was wrong. They despised him because he was too right. He walked through the city and asked questions no one else dared to ask. Questions that revealed cracks in their illusions. Questions that left the powerful humiliated. Imagine being a respected politician, admired by the crowds. You speak confidently in the assembly. You wear the robes. You pretend to be wise. Then Socrates all of a sudden arrives and asks you a few questions. Within minutes, your confidence crumbles. Your wisdom is exposed as a facade. You stand naked before the truth. Of course, you'd hate him. That hatred wasn't about Socrates, the man, it was about what he represented. He was the living reminder that all authority is fragile. And this is why people have hated you. When you ask questions, you don't just embarrass others, you expose their submission. You reveal that their obedience is weakness. You show that they've built their identity on sand. And so, like Socrates, you become the scapegoat. If you've been treated as the enemy simply because you told the truth, it's because you carry the same burden as Socrates. Don't walk alone. Join the Catharsis on Patreon now. Find the link in the description box. The world doesn't want your questions, it wants your silence. Schools don't want children who challenge teachers, they want obedience. Jobs don't want employees who question policies, they want compliance. Families don't want members who break traditions, they want conformity. Everywhere you go, you've told the same thing in different words. Stop asking why. But you can't. It's not in you to obey blindly. It's not in you to follow their truth. It's just not in you to kneel before lies. This is why you've always been the outsider, because questioning authority means refusing silence, and refusing silence means becoming a threat. The Socratic burden is costly. It costs friendships, it costs opportunities, it costs belonging. Think of your life. How many doors have closed because you refused to play along? How many people have turned away because your questions made them uncomfortable? How many times have you been left standing alone because you wouldn't compromise truth for acceptance? The pain you carry, the loneliness, the rejection, the exile is not random. It is the price of the question. Every question costs you something, but every cost proves you were never meant to live like them. Inside Diogenes' barrel, the price of exile becomes your greatest strength. If you've paid with loneliness, it's time to collect your inheritance. Enter Diogenes' barrel on Patreon from the link in the description box. For ordinary people, obedience feels safe. They like rules. They like being told what to do. They like submission because it relieves them of responsibility. But for you, obedience feels like death. Every time you try to force yourself to fit in, your soul screamed. Every time you swallowed your questions, your fire burned hotter. Every time you tried to leave like the placeholders, you felt like you were suffocating. That suffocation wasn't weakness, it was clarity. It was your soul refusing the hemlock. And that's why you cannot live like them, because what they call safety feels like poison to you. Most people think a question is just a thought, but for you, it's different. Your questions are fire. They burn through illusions. They set authority on edge. They shake the ground beneath the system. And that fire is not meant to be suppressed, it is meant to be wielded. This is the true Socratic burden, not just carrying the question, but carrying the responsibility of what it awakens. Because every question you ask is a spark, and sparks ignite revolutions. If you're ready to sharpen your questions into weapons of truth, begin where Socrates began, with discipline. The Pythagorean path is your initiation. Join the Pythagorean path on Patreon now from the link in the description box. The irony is that Athens thought killing Socrates would silence him. Instead, it made him immortal. 2000 and more years later, the names of his judges are forgotten, but his name lives. His burden lives. His fire lives. And the same will be true for you. The people who mocked you will be forgotten. The ones who excluded you will vanish. The ones who tried to silence you will dissolve into dust, but your fire will remain. Your questions will echo. Your exile will become legend. This is the outsider's legacy, the Socratic burden. To suffer now, but to leave a mark that cannot be erased. The Aurelius Council exists for those ready to turn legacy into leadership. If you know your suffering is not the end, but the beginning, this is where you belong. Join the Aurelius Council now on Patreon. Find the link in the description box. You cannot escape the burden. The questions will always burn in you. The fire will always rage. The exile will always follow you. The only choice you have is this: will you let the burden crush you, or will you carry it as your crown? Socrates carried it to death, but you have the chance to carry it to power, because this time the questioner doesn't have to die in silence. This time the exile doesn't have to drink the hemlock. This time the outsider can rise. And this is the call before you. Join the Catharsians. Don't waste the fire you've carried alone. Step into the tribe of outsiders who carry the same burden. Join the Catharsians on Patreon now. The world has not changed since Athens. It still worships authority. It still punishes questions. it still fears outsiders. When you ask why, people don't hear curiosity, they hear danger because your question threatens their comfort. Your question exposes their lies. Your question refuses to let them hide. That's why they avoid you. That's why they mock you. That's why they whisper about you when you leave the room. You are a living reminder that their obedience is cowardice, and the world will always fear what it cannot tame. If you felt the sting of being feared for simply existing, you are a Catharsian. Begin your path now. Join the Catharsians on Patreon now. You've tried to live like them. You've tried to shallow your questions. You've tried to play along. But every time you did, your soul suffocated. That suffocation wasn't weakness, it was clarity. It was your body screaming, "This is not your life." The Socratic burden hurts because it forces you to live in two worlds at once. One world is the illusion where everybody obeys. The other is truth, where your fire refuses to kneel. And you've never belonged to the first world. That's why you've always felt like a stranger in your own life. But here's the secret: the pain was never punishment, it was initiation, it was the mark that you were chosen for something higher, something greater. You're a Catharsian. You've been punished for your questions, not because they were wrong, but because they were right, or too right. When you asked your teacher why the rules mattered, you revealed they were powerless without them. When you asked your boss why policies existed, you revealed they were built on nothing. When you asked your family why traditions mattered, you revealed they had no reason beyond fear. And in every case, authority responded the same way, not with answers, but with punishment. That's how you know you were never meant to obey, because your very existence makes obedience look weak. If you've seen the weakness of authority and felt the burden of exile, it's time to sharpen that fire. Begin where Socrates began. Join the Catharsians on Patreon now. Find the link in the description box. Think about your life, the loneliness, the misunderstanding, the moments you wondered if something was wrong with you. Nothing was wrong. It was all proof. Proof that you were never meant to blend in. Proof that your soul was not designed for silence. Proof that your questions are the fire that separates you from placeholders. Exile is not the evidence of weakness. Exile is the evidence of strength. Because only the strong can survive without belonging. Only the strong can keep asking when everybody else bows. Only the strong can endure the burden and still rise. Inside Diogenes' barrel, exile becomes a crown. If you're ready to wear the proof of your suffering as a weapon, this is where you belong. Enter Diogenes' barrel from the link in the description box. Questioning authority is not just rebellion, it is the seed of leadership, because every leader begins as an outsider. Every leader begins as the one who asks why when others stay silent. Every leader begins as the one who can't obey. Socrates carried the burden to death. His fire awakened a generation. His questions outlived his body. And now the same fire burns in you. You've asked the questions. You've suffered the exile. You've carried the rage. The only step forward is leadership. Not leadership in the system sense, not management, not titles, not bureaucracy. Leadership in the true sense. The ability to carry fire so others can ignite. And that is the highest burden. That is the Aurelius level. If you know you were born not just to question but to lead, then step into the Aurelius Council. This is where Catharsians become leaders of fire. Join the Aurelius Council on Patreon. Find the link in the description box. You cannot erase the questions. They will never leave you. They are the fire that will burn until your last breath. The only choice left is what you do with them. You can keep carrying the burden alone, letting it eat you alive, letting it crush you under the weight of exile, or you can carry it as your crown. You are a Catharsian. You can weaponize your rage. You can turn exile into initiation. You can turn questions into leadership. This is your trial. This is your hemlock. This is your burden. But unlike Socrates, you don't have to die in silence. This time, the outsider can rise and must rise. The questioner can lead, the Catharsian can burn. Three paths stand open right now. The Pythagorean path. This path is for those ready to turn questions into discipline, to sharpen fire into clarity, to begin the work. The second one is the Diogenes barrel for those who've carried exile long enough and are ready to wear it as power, to transform rejection into strength. And then the Aurelius Council for those who know their destiny is leadership, to turn the burden into a crown and rise as rulers of fire. The Socratic burden will not disappear. The only choice left is how you carry it. Don't waste it. Don't let the world silence you. Don't let your questions die in your throat. Choose fire. Choose exile. Choose power. Choose leadership. Join the Catharsians today. Find the link in the description box. Join the Catharsians on Patreon and wear the crown that you were always supposed to wear.